It's live now.
We're live. We're all here, so I'll call the meeting to order.
No, we're not all here.
We're not? Oh, I'm sorry. Nancy texted me. She's sick. I guess she's got a, either a flu or something like that. And has graciously volunteered to skip this meeting so she doesn't give it to all of us.
But you've been sworn in?
My understanding is that, Darlene, and you could, maybe this information comes from you, because she's just filling in to the end of someone else's term, she doesn't need to be sworn in?
Because she's been appointed by the board, she doesn't need to be sworn in.
So, but then her term ends at the end of this year, which is when Maureen's term would have ended anyway.
Correct.
Okay, so we do have a quorum, and we only have...
Just wait 1 minute. I want to make sure I get everybody here.
Oh, it's gonna be a long evening.
Gary, shush.
Well, he's taking the name.
Worthington, Garrity, Brady, Kearns, Herbst, Jensen, Hayes, Osborne, Adams. Oh, how could I forget you, Debbie? And who's the 11th? 3?
You get John Johnson?
I get John Johnson, okay. Thank you. I don't think we need this, but Leslie does it all the time.
Okay,
Ready?
so our only agenda item today is just the Board of Selectmen budget for 2019-2020. I guess we basically are proposing, what is it, I have a percentage increase here somewhere.
7.8.
7.8% increase to their budget, mostly taken up by salaries, new job positions, and I guess a one-time increase in the grant to the library. Does that pretty much sum up?
Which you doubled.
Right, no, I understand that, but does that pretty much sum up
Yes.
the increases?
There's also a one-time in there for
The
air monitoring over at Kent School, $4,500.
Okay.
There's also increase to insurance,
There is a,
increase to insurance.
okay.
Health insurance.
Health
yeah,
insurance.
the budget includes a pretty hefty increase in health
And that was
insurance.
something that you mentioned may not actually
We are-
be quite that high.
We're working on it.
Bruce, you said 7.8, does that include the extra 20,000 for the library?
No.
No, so it's really more than 7.
Right.
Okay.
So I see the health insurance lines going up,
What's shown,
obviously by different departments. Do we have an actual number for just the health insurance?
the health insurance in that budget throughout the whole thing has been at 18.3% increase.
Do we have a dollar figure for that?
The actual proposed increase right now from Aetna is 25%, which is what prompted us to find an alternative, and that's what we're meeting tomorrow with a broker who has come up with an attractive alternative, but it has to be pretty close to what we got to go with it. But we'll have a better answer for you when next you meet, I hope.
The 18%, do we have a dollar figure for what that represents to the?
We do, but it's skewed because there have been changes in the health insurance since it was budgeted for this fiscal year. So actually, at the 18%, not including the new position, it actually is $10,000 less than what was budgeted last year.
And that's because?
Of changes, individual changes,
You
people.
mean people going off and?
Well, people change from being,
I went from married to single.
Okay,
and there was another person that changed
Another person, same thing.
okay.
from being,
Okay, so then that's not meaningfully affecting the bottom line to the budget?
at this, well, not at the 18%, but it probably will the 25%.
Okay. Anybody got thoughts where they want to start?
I'll ask Barbara a question.
Okay.
Barbara, you plugged $566,000 here.
Yeah.
As a transfer from the unreserved general fund to maintain the 18.61 mill rate.
Yep.
If we were to take down the current unreserved general fund to a point that represented 2 months of the projected budget,
Okay,
what would that, removing the 566 and plugging that number in, what would that make the mill rate?
I don't know.
You need your little computer for that, don't you?
Well, but I'd have to change, I still have to change the budget document to either reflect the 25% increase in insurance, reflect the additional 20,000 you guys put in. So there's a lot of things in
Sure.
play.
Yeah.
And I
You
just,
gave us you sent us that number today for the unassigned,
yes,
And Jim requested that.
right,
Sent that to
yeah, and that's always on this document, if you have one of these, it's always on here. It's on the bottom,
What was on here?
I think it's on the back of that.
yeah, it's on there too, yeah,
Front and back.
but you can see year over year, you have one of these. I believe it's the kind of bluish line on the bottom.
And do you want to talk about any expenses?
So-
That's the recommendation.
right now we have, that just doing some
It's
rough
based on
math.
the budget.
As of 2018, the unassigned general fund was 2517261.
Right.
Looking at 2019, total budget 12869. Okay. 2 months would be 2.14 million. So we're looking at approximately 400,000 in that unassigned, right?
Well,
So
actually, you look at
this is just
the-
using the numbers that are here.
I know, but the current year budget, you would use 2 months of the current year budget.
Are you talking about 18?
Yes, no,
So
well,
that, there's very little difference
12,879,
there, so,
but you'd have to add the other 20 to that, whatever, but.
So, but basically, the 566 is probably already a little above what we,
Could take out of the general.
what, if we establish 2 months is what we wanna keep. Which-
Except,
Hang on though, one of the important parts about what we do with that is our bond, rate if and when we go to fund streetscape, correct? So we probably wouldn't want to,
Yeah, you
Consider
don't wanna have
going
these highs
below.
and lows, you wanna
right,
keep it as steady as you can. I have sent out emails to all the departments asking them to review their budgets, asking them what portion of their budget, if any, will be unexpended for this fiscal year, so I can start to project what the fund balance is gonna be. And I've gotten responses, I think, from 3 departments who've already told me, I'm gonna spend the whole thing. So, I don't know.
except they don't.
I know, but
And
No, I'm one of the 3 and I will.
anyway,
the 2.517, 2,517,000, that already has the 338,000 removed.
that's right.
Now, for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years,
oh, you mean
We didn't
that,
spend
that's is that what we're using in this
Yeah.
year's?
yeah.
That has the 3, whatever it is, out of it. The
But we will spend
388.
some of it this year
Right.
probably,
Maybe.
but if you look at the board,
Historically, we haven't spent it
if you
all.
look at the Board of Ed budget, they're planning between the high school and
They're
elementary
giving back
return
over 100.
over 100,000. Okay, tax collection, because you're spending your whole budget, you're gonna collect so much more in taxes. I mean, we go through the same thing every year. I just don't think it's worth worrying about it.
Well, I don't think we should be worried about it. I think Jim's point was, you know, can we have a higher number than 566 and what would that do to the mill rate? Of course, we're not able to determine that today.
Well, what I'm saying is, I don't think we have to raise the mill rate, no matter what number we use.
No, I would tend to agree with that.
That was.
Because we're fairly conservative the past 3, 4 years, and it's worked.
And I only threw that number in on that document, just to give you guys a starting place, just so you
That's
could
why I
see,
called the plug number.
just to see what it would be, where you're starting.
Other comments?
Well, let me go back to what I started last week. With all due respect to all the people sitting in this room who are gonna be affected by my comments, I don't think we should raise salaries to the extent that the selectmen proposed. I have tremendous dislike for management study committees, just like I have a tremendous dislike for architects who you're told to come up with a plan and they come up with a Cadillac plan. Cadillac isn't even the biggest anymore. MG, Peugeot, whatever. So, I don't want to listen to anything the management plan said, but that's just me. I'm looking at the salaries, and I'm looking at the salary for the town hall people. I'm not talking about the transfer station people. Town clerk, selectman's administrative assistant, treasurer, assistant assessor, town clerk, assistant. Are those the only ones we're talking about, 5 or 6? I feel strongly that we cannot give raises over 10%. I feel very strongly that everybody should get a raise whether they ask for it or not, because you're raising the position, you're not necessarily raising the person. They don't want to take it, they don't have to take it, but it still should be in the budget. I would like to see, and I have no, just like the president, I have no plan for anything, raises between 5% and 10%, perhaps raises of 3%, 4% for the people who didn't want any raise, and with a statement in the records that this is year one of hopefully a 2 or 3 year process. I don't think the idea of giving 3% raises to everybody is a good idea based on my wonderful management plan that I've been bitching about. But I think we ought to start with 10% as a ceiling, and maybe 5% as a bottom line, and based on what the percentages were in, and I'm looking at the newspaper, but I'm sure somebody else has another sheet. Based on what the percentages were, we should set up a structure that way. I mean, for people who have gotten 3% raises forever, even you were saying last week that 3% raises are a lot for some people who don't get them. But in the municipal sector, 3% was 3% was a base. Raises of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, I think are okay for year one of our plan. And whoever's sitting at this table next year, or who's ever in the first selectman's office, maybe it'll be me, can, thank you for laughing, please. Yeah. Maybe we'll continue this process. I don't have a calculator, I have no computer in front of me like the finance board members used to have, but I think this is what I think we should think about.
I disagree. The email that we got from Barbara said that the selectmen set the salaries, not the Board of Finance.
That's
Said
in
the
the policy.
selectmen did the policy for the town of Kent, the handbook.
Not always.
That's what it said, that's what was quoted in the email. And to that extent, I don't think we need to micromanage salary levels because we're not the selectmen.
No, the selectmen set the salaries and the Board of Finance makes the official decisions.
Okay, well, I vote in, or would agree with the plan that they presented us.
Okay, that's
So I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, that's okay.
If there are people that need to get equal fast, then make them equal fast, rather than making them wait 3 years to get equal.
I would just like to
That's not
correct
very
something here. It's the voters in town who actually will set all this, okay? It's not the select board, it's not the finance, it's the voters in town, the taxpayers.
Well, we're talking about the budget we will present to them.
Right, and the voters can vote it down.
Right.
My question is in terms of the big raises, in terms of percentages, as I think is the feedback that I'm getting from people is that number. And again, 20% or 30% is quite high, people have felt. So if we look at over time, maybe that might mellow things out a bit in terms of that, but an initial giant raise is not being well received by many people.
I have no particular argument with
appears to me that this is happening because we haven't properly compensated people over the years. And whether we try to fix that all at once or over a smaller number of years, that's had an effect, I tend to favor spreading it out, not over 5 or 6 years, but a couple of years.
I kind
Does
of.
that take it down the road? I don't know.
Well, I mean, you know,
It really
I-
doesn't matter whether we do it all at once or over 2 or 3 years, it still gets kicked down the road. That effect still carries through.
I guess I, in my own mind, I'm thinking of it in two different ways. I think that there are some employees, and I didn't really look at it specifically, but there are some employees that are actually, you know, doing more work. And if someone is doing more work or needing to work more hours or that kind of stuff, then I think we need to, those employees should probably receive the more compensation right off the bat. The employees that we're looking at bringing up to par, whatever that might be and whatever interpretation that might be, that's where I start to have a little trouble with large percentage increases. You know, so in my own mind, I'm kind of thinking of it as two different groups of people. So if there are certain people who are, for whatever reason, I'm gonna say the treasurer only because, you know, the state throws more stuff for us to report on, and so then that takes more time to do, then she should be compensated more if she's, you know, and I'm just making this up, I don't even know if that's why you got a raise or not. I'm just using this as an example.
And that's one of the smaller increases.
Yeah, so, you know, but from my standpoint, that to me, if we're asking someone to do more work, then we need to pay them more money right off the bat.
Bruce, could I ask a quick question? All these positions have job descriptions. How recently have they been updated?
They're updated every 2 years.
So were they updated as a result of the management survey?
None have been updated since the survey.
That would seem to be the thing.
That was revealed October 1st, so they have not been updated since that time, no. They had just been done prior to that.
It would be interesting to look at the difference between the current.
There were some recommendations, job description recommendations that came out as a result of the management review, which ruffled a lot of, more than ruffled feathers, left people, almost all of us, incredulous in that, you know, I'll use Barbara as an example, she doesn't qualify for the job.
Poor
that she's
Barbara.
got. I don't qualify for the job
You don't qualify for any job you've
Well, I
ever
know
had.
that, but I don't qualify for this one, according to that proposed, and we're not the only ones.
Why? Seriously, why?
Because he inserted certain experiences and qualifications that we don't have. So
What
we're
does-
not accepting those, we're
What
not
does,
putting
you
those.
see, this is
we're
exactly what
not
I'm saying.
adopting
This
them.
person comes from Glastonbury or Weathersfield and immediately tells Ken
Yeah,
what
but
they
excuse
should.
me, to the point, you don't throw the whole thing out, Ed, and that's the thing. There were some very relevant points that, and salient points that helped us, specifically with assistance, which we struggled with because we had a disparity in assistance, and so why you're seeing that assistant line going up is because we're trying to even those out, to make sure that if you're an assistant in one place and an assistant in another, your pay scale is relatively the same.
And that really prompted the management review.
That's
more
what
than
started the whole
anything
thing. That started the whole
else. That was last year.
And if you think of it in dollar terms instead of percentage terms, you have much less sticker shock.
Well, that's a good point, Mark, and I'm a little disappointed that at our last get-together, I specifically stated that these increases, which they're large percentages, I get that, in total, after a 2.8% across-the-board increase, which everybody is proposed to get, in total, $22,000, and 5 minutes later, you added $20,000 into this budget to increase the library.
I went through the numbers, and I don't know how you calculated that $22,000, Bruce.
I didn't, Barbara did.
Well, if you look at the document that I emailed you the other day, if you look at column G, go down to the bottom.
What
This is the one with the salaries on it, it has a greenish colored
I
stripe
emailed
down
it
the
to
middle
you.
of it.
The other day. It's,
This was one of the things she just emailed. So column G is right here. And these are raises that are being proposed,
they're
I
above
guess,
the
above
two
the
point eight
COLA
percent.
raises.
And there are also changes in wages that haven't already been put into place. There's been 2 adjustments that were put into place in October, and those are affecting the budget too, but I broke those out and they're on column F so that you can see that. But if the selectmen didn't make any other changes and they just gave everybody the 2.8, you're only talking for the dollar amount in column G. Because
Okay,
there's
this
some
is-
people who are increased because of their hours.
That's key to understand
Yes.
too.
No.
That's column 8.
So this doesn't of course take into effect the result of these increases on pension, healthcare.
Well, that was
those
in the
kind of
22.
increases.
Healthcare, no, because the healthcare isn't tied to your wages.
Okay.
But the pension, that's why this column G is only 21, because that doesn't include the pension piece.
Thank you.
But it really, when you do include it, it's like 22, whatever that number was, I had the other day.
Well, I guess the question I have is, if we consider these increases as necessary and decide that we should agree that they should be done in the proposed budget, how do we stick with the no rate that's in effect now?
Well, you know, by moving, what was it, 566, approximately 566,000 from the unassigned.
By exceeding the guideline of two months?
Well, no, because that, to Ed's point, the 330 some odd that we have tentatively scheduled to use in this fiscal year probably will not all be used. So the numbers that I just gave before left about approximately 400,000 in the unassigned fund. The 330, you want to say we spend half of it? I mean, historically, we have not spent,
Correct.
you know, so I would say that half that is probably a reasonable assumption. Last year, I don't think we spent any that we.
For 3 years, we haven't spent any.
So there's probably more than just 400,000 in that unassigned fund. So the 566 is probably not a stretch. But now we're really talking about 586 because of the extra 20 for the library and, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, from the way that I look at this too is the idea that, you know, it's, whether it's done in a year or whether it's done over 3 to 4 years, and whether you fight around the edges about this employee or that employee, whatever you want to do, however you want to contemplate it. You know, because of debt retirement in the next couple of years, it's really not going to affect the mill rate. And so, you know, the idea of adding another person to Rick's crew, recognizing that the transfer station needs extra help. I mean, this is as good a time as any for us to, you know, to consider those types of things, because, you know, we're gonna not have to raise taxes a lot to accomplish that.
I don't disagree, I just felt I needed to ask that question.
The question is, do we just go all in, or do we figure out some sort of program over several years? I don't, you know.
If we're righting a wrong, let's right it right away. If these people have been underpaid for a long time, let's get them to where they need to be. all at once. Why would you write it wrong slowly?
I think down
I don't, I think wrong that's just the wrong way to say it. I don't think
If they've been
anybody.
underpaid for a long time, why
Yeah,
not?
Oh, the
No,
position.
no, no, I think that's just the wrong way to look at it. There is a relationship between an employee and employer. Someone says that I have this position available, this position pays X. Someone has a choice as to whether to take that position or not.
Or run
And
for office too.
whatever they wanna do. Okay, so that person has accepted that job at that rate of pay, so they've decided that that's an adequate rate of pay. Now, we can compare them to other places. Veterinarians in different parts of the country make less money than I do, and they make more money than I do, and it's based on where they're located. Doesn't matter, you know, they're not working, doing different things, they're doing basically the same thing. So when you look at this and say a position in Sharon is being paid 20% more than the position in Kent, it doesn't necessarily, at least to me, mean that the Kent person's being underpaid. It just means that the Sharon person is getting more. Then you could compare the person in Goshen, and that person in Goshen is getting 10% less than the person in Kent. You know, so you can, I think, be in a circle of that. So I don't necessarily think people have been underpaid.
Well, the selectmen obviously do, because they wouldn't be making these raises if they didn't.
No, I think that the idea of bringing compensation up more in line is an idea. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it's a can of worms that has been opened. Should have never been opened in my view, okay, but it has been opened. And so, we have made this comparison, and now people are under the impression that they're not getting paid enough. That creates, in my view, in a work environment that's not necessarily a positive work environment. People don't feel like they're gonna go out of their way to do the extra 9 yards or however you wanna put it.
But it's easy to
So,
fix.
we can fix it, and the question is, do we go with your idea or the selectmen's idea, which is all at once? Do we take a couple of years to do it? I don't know that I have an answer for that.
2 points I'd like to make. I will state for the record that I do not believe anybody in any department will work less because they were not getting compensated. 1. 2, underpaid may be an over-exaggeration, if you will. We have looked carefully through management to see that they were compensated, but in that compensation, and comparing it to other towns, we looked at the human beings that were actually in it, because there's tenure, there's a budget control that they bring that we considered, and these are the fine points. Which brings me to my second point. If you decide to do percentages over time or something like that, you will be breaking with a tradition that the Board of Finance has. The tradition typically is you're concerned with a certain sector or segment or portion of the budget. You're going to ask us to look at that again and consider changing that from a philosophical point of view. We will then typically take that under advisement and work with the departments to try to do that. But to sit here and say, when in all honesty, you have not done the hard work of looking at all of these positions, you have not done the hard work of looking at comparing it from town to town. And with all due respect to our board, I think we deserve that courtesy, given the time and the energy. Whether we've made gaffes by whether you think it's right or wrong to hire somebody on the outside to give you a perspective, I think it was right. But that said, if you think it's right or wrong is irrelevant. What's relevant is we are the managers, and if you have a philosophical difference in any line, if you said, gee, I don't know about social services, why are we giving so many people social services? Why are you expanding that department? Well, that's a philosophical point that you could turn back to us. But let us do the hard work that we've already continued to do, if indeed you feel that salary-wise we have to look at that.
Well, along those same lines, I don't have it with me, but Barbara sent you an email a few days ago. It caught me off guard because I knew it had been a long budget season that we had this year, but when I saw the number of meetings and the number of motions and the number, I think you have that there, it just supports everything that Chris just said in terms of how much time, and I hope you got a chance to look at it. 12 executive sessions, 53 agenda items were devoted to wages. 4 increases resulted from expanded hours. The Board of Selectmen met 21 times in 6 months, devoting over 50 hours to management review, employee compensation, proposed budget. This didn't come lightly. It was agony at times for for us and for the employees, those that are here and those that are not. It was a very difficult time, but we feel that we did it right. We have mixed feelings, as do you, about the management review, and we didn't adopt everything from it and won't. But we feel it was an exercise, and I wasn't a big proponent of it to begin with, I'll admit it, because I said it publicly. But it brought it brought fresh eyes, a fresh look at things, and made a difference. And I just want to make sure that you realize how much time and effort went into this, and we feel that it's been done for all the right reasons. At the same time, while I have the floor for a moment, I have to reiterate, the library was perfectly happy with getting $20,000 this year and 20 next year. They said, you know what, she was very pleased, and she said, we'll take the other 20 out of our savings, knowing that we're gonna get the other 20 next year. They were still gonna go forward and do the work. They were fine with the way it was proposed in that budget. And the last thing, which I just can't...
I wanna interrupt you for 1 second. That's apples to oranges, okay? That's a one-time expense.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so you can't compare the library expense to wages.
Oh, I'm not
Because once
comparing it to
those
wages,
I'm just saying that that's a
No, that has
totally
nothing to
different
do
type
with
of
wages.
expense.
No, I get that.
Okay.
I
But with
wasn't
all
saying
due
that.
respect,
But it has
the
to do
library is a private entity. It is not a function of the town,
And
as much as,
and if it wasn't run as a private
But
entity,
that's
the
not my-
town would run it.
Mark,
No,
like you, I don't look to the
let's not
future.
get into
No,
an argument about the
I'm not
library.
comparing that to wage. That has nothing to do with wages. That's just in my short list of things having to do with the budget.
Okay.
Apologies for confusion. But the third and final thing I just have to say, and I said it to a few people off the record, now I'll make it, I really have to take issue with the free ride that you gave the Board of Education the other night. Kudos to them for bringing in a budget that shows no increase. Very pleased with that. But this is a school that I love dearly, and you know that, but it's a school that has declined enrollment since I left in 2005 by 70 students, and has increased staff, not dramatically, but they certainly haven't decreased any staff. There have been over 10 retirements, at least 10, which I recounted when I couldn't fall asleep the other night after our meeting. There might be 11 or 12, but there's at least 10, and I'm one of them. And every single one of those was filled. Sharon, on the other hand, an article in the paper that I have here, coincidentally, in the same time period, in 2005, they had 10.2 retirements, they did not fill or reduced staff by 10 during that time. Now granted, their enrollment is down dramatically more than ours is. They're down to low hundreds, so there's more room and need for it. But, you know, as pleased as I am to see them make the effort to come through with a no increase budget, and the high school, from what I understand, has done the same thing. I really think that there's, I'm not saying that to justify anything that we've done, because I still feel we've done the right thing, and I'm not saying they should reduce it further so we can make sure our raises get voted positively. I just wanted to get it out there as something that has bothered me since the meeting. And it happens every year. I used to kid about it when Tracy Horosky was the chair, and she was prettier than me, and so she got a free pass every year. But Tracy's not here anymore, and hasn't been for quite a while.
Marty's prettier than you also.
He probably is too, yeah. But they get very little.
So,
I get grilled. I've been grilled every year in this room at this budget. Every year I get literally grilled in a nice way, I have to say. You're a nice group of people to deal with, nicer than some past boards. But I get grilled here every year. And I used to give out handouts and so forth to present this budget. you may have noticed I didn't give out any this year, because I was trying a new approach. I was trying to some extent, the Board of Education approach, who gives you a budget and basically says, any questions?
There's a couple of different things that I'd like to say about your comments. The first is that I wish you had said this at the last meeting.
Well, I didn't wanna make it sound like us versus them.
No, but I don't ever take it that way.
I didn't want them to take it that
Personally,
way.
well, you know what?
Because they've done a
it's-
good job on this budget.
Yeah, but the reality is that, I personally wouldn't have the first idea of how efficient or inefficient their budget is. And so I appreciate hearing from Ed and from you, because you guys used to be in the building doing it. So from my standpoint, your input about their budget is valuable to me. Okay, so I would have appreciated hearing that at the time, only from the standpoint of having them explain a little bit more to us about what their thinking is. The second part is the idea that we don't actually have anywhere near as much control over
That I
their
understand.
budget
I
than your
get-
budget.
You don't have to explain
Okay,
that. I
and
get- I
that's-
don't like
yeah,
that, I don't think
right.
it's right, but it's
But
fact
that's, yeah,
by statute.
okay, so
I get that.
I think that that's why, you know, we don't delve nearly as much into details, because we just don't have that legal right, at least I don't. And so if I see something about their budget, it's almost always about asking them to reduce it by a total number, it's not.
It's always been that way. But that's always been the way with us too, I mean.
Right.
from
And I
my-
think, to
the
be
earliest for
fair,
me was,
I think that I seem to remember that most of the board was sort of, our board, was not thrilled and actually against the idea of the management review. And I think that's why you're getting a little bit of a pushback from that standpoint, because we were not for it, we asked you not to spend the money, and so now.
Reduced it from 10 to 5, if
Right.
you remember.
So, you know, I think that may be part of why we're a little disgruntled with what's happening as well, because we didn't believe in it to begin with. You can make an argument one way or the other, and we can argue about it till the cows come home, but, you know, we are where we're at
It's
right
done.
now. Yep, exactly, so.
Mark, I've got a procedural question. It's a little bit not on this point. At last week's meeting, there were 5 of us here. And when the motion came up to double the stipend to the library, 2 people voted yes, 1 person voted no, and 2 people abstained. Can a motion carry without having a majority of the 5 people there voting on it? You've got 2 votes out of 5. But we said it passed, and I'm not convinced that it was passed.
I don't know. Does anybody know?
Parliamentarian here?
I think it's okay because you had the quorum, even though 2 people abstained.
Yeah, you have 2 extensions.
Do you know?
I think you're okay.
It's based on the representation that was sitting at the table.
Yeah,
You
you're
know,
right.
the action of the abstaining is just a function of a vote. You can vote yea, you can vote no, and you can abstain, but as long as the vote becomes a positive, it's still,
So you don't need a majority to get a,
not in
to
this
pass.
sense, you have, not in
The
this.
majority of the people voted.
Majority of the people voting.
okay, just wanted to clarify
Actually,
that.
And
no,
there's
that's
no-
a good point.
And there's no law that says the 2 of you have to abstain. So-
Actually, I would clarify that, you recused yourselves, so you don't even have a vote, there should be no abstention, they completely recused themselves.
That is correct.
Right.
So you
Which
should not
means
even be
what?
a record.
Which means we lose our quorum.
No,
No,
no, not if you
no.
recuse, not if you recuse, because they are,
Still-
I think,
It's a 6-member board and 3 people were here to vote for it, 2 of them recused themselves.
Yeah.
I think the quorum is to recognize the function of opening the meeting so that you can act on opening the meeting. What goes from there becomes to the function of the motion. That's my
Good
understanding.
point, Darlene, but what, I'm just curious, I'm not trying to make trouble. What if 2 of them have to get up and leave in the middle of the meeting? They suddenly lose the quorum and,
No,
No.
like I said, I
because it
believe
was established, it's always.
I believe the quorum was established at the opening of the meeting. That's how I understand it.
Okay.
you can check that.
I mean, I have no,
You think
it's a fair question,
Yeah.
and I have no problem if you wanna run it past town council. I mean, if this is gonna be an issue, I
I'm
just,
not-
It'll cost almost as much as the 20,000.
That's
I
an
mean,
interesting
it's a good question, and I don't have, the answer is I don't know the answer, so,
I don't either.
So revote it then, if you're so concerned about this.
No,
Same
because
result.
the
you're
same
gonna get the
situation.
same result, yeah.
Right, it would be the same.
We certainly can revisit it at our next meeting when Nancy is here. We can redo it at that point, then we would have 4, which would then, you know, and kind of go from there.
It could end up 2 and 2, it's a good question.
And then, I don't know, I mean, I don't have the right answer to that, so. Anyways,
Right now, it's.
And if I might just finish and actually add on to what you said about learning things about the way the school works, there are, at Kent Center School this year, 3 grades. There's one grade, full grade, remember 2 classes per grade, 1 grade with 15 kids in it. There's another grade with 17 kids in it, and there's another grade with 18 kids in it. So those are grades that are being taught, like a class of 7 and a class of 8.
so, you specifically asked the question of the Board of Ed,
Declining
what
enrollment.
enrollment was doing, and they told us specifically that it was stable.
Yes.
Well, here's the how far back do you consider stable? Give me a year.
Well, no, I mean,
1842.
18, no, I only go back to 2005.
I was asking a question about the current year.
Past 5 years, 256, 240, 238, 222, 213.
That's not stable.
That's not
And
particularly
2002,
stable.
when I retired, there were over 300.
That's not stable.
But you did ask the question, you
Right.
were told it was stable.
That's correct. you did.
no,
And I
that
asked the
is,
question too, and they told me similar
The
misinformation.
Board of Ed meets the first Wednesday of every people, and nobody goes, except the parents who are
Teachers.
upset with NYPs, not yet proficient forms. Go to the Board of Ed meeting, start talking.
Well, can we re-examine the Board of Education budget because of that, what could be called a misstatement on their part?
we can do anything we want. I think we have to, if we want to, though, we'll have to schedule another meeting, because I don't think we can let it go to the April meeting.
Nor can you do it without letting the Board of Ed know that you've had
No,
a change of
absolutely.
Well, because they're not here, because they
No,
felt
yeah,
that they
yeah,
were
yeah,
taken
yeah.
care of.
But you did ask the
Accept it.
principal,
Right.
and she did tell you that next year's projected kindergarten class is equal to the kindergarten class this year.
That's my
That's
recollection.
stable. She gave you an honest answer,
Kindergarten this year has 20.
and she said next year is the same.
Okay, I don't, we actually voted to accept the Board of Ed budget last time around, so can we reopen that if we want to?
That's why I asked the question.
I suppose we can if we want to.
2 questions for the attorney, it's less money.
Well,
Okay.
I think we as a board have to vote first to reopen it if that's
Yeah.
what you wanna do. And I would certainly urge you not to do it, because you will get the whole budget voted down in May if you do something like that. It's a terrible procedure.
And I'm not urging that either, I'm just bringing it up, that's all.
I don't have any particular appetite for looking at the Board of Ed budget
I mean, but it's something to think about for
Yes.
next year.
again. Absolutely.
And have some of us, or some of the selectmen, start going to Board of Ed meetings early. Not just March and April, but throughout the year.
Well, as a taxpayer here, I can say that, you know, with declining enrollment at not only the center school, but the high school as well, the cost per tuition per student is astronomical. The high school is, last year was over $27,000 per student. We have 3 high schools in town. We should probably be sending them to there and cutting a deal with the private schools to take the town's, you know, the taxpayer tuition and apply that to tuition at the private schools, and not bus them an hour away there and an hour away back. That's
That's
ludicrous.
been discussed over the years.
Look how
Yeah.
over it's going.
Yeah.
27,000 per student.
So, to get back to the selectmen's budget, does anybody have a motion?
I move we accept it as is presented.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, so I guess.
We're done.
We're done.
Thank you.
Let me, give me a minute.
Oh, wait a second, is there some public input in this meeting, or?
No,
You've given some.
It's a special meeting.
What's that?
it's a special meeting.
You've given some,
This is a special meeting?
This is
Yeah.
a special meeting. Our regular meeting was last week.
Blacketer
This isn't one of the regulars, the regulars.
and McQuinn's, right?
Special.
Very good.
Thank you, Ed.
Oh, wait, did you go to open meeting? You saw opportunity for them?